5%. The Bank of Canada actually conceded they raised the interest rates. No big surprise here at all. All of you who follow the channel know that we've been calling for the rates to go up. They should have raised them before, but now they have had to do it. They've been forced to, and they are going at the Canadian economy with like a sledgehammer, beating them over the head until they just concede and go into a recession, and people are going to take more and more losses. I mean, the craziness that is going on, you can't write this stuff. It's like straight out of a book. All right, let's take a look at what the Bank of Canada says. Go directly to the Bank of Canada. This is not opinion. We want to be right down the middle of the road. What are they telling us? So the Bank of Canada today increased their target to overnight rate at 4.75%, bank rate at 5%. And they're going to be continuing its policy of quantitative tightening. All right, we got to know those two things. It's important for us to know. So those two things, number one, the rate is going up. They also mentioned overnight rate. For those who don't know, overnight rate is the night rate that they set for banks to be lending back and forth between each other. But that's the only rate that they set. Whenever we're looking at bonds or T-bills in the United States or whatever it is, all of that is up to the market to decide. The market kind of is weighing what the value is of that unit. So that's the big money, the smart money. They can only set the overnight rate. That's the first thing to know. Number two, they're talking about quantitative tightening. So they're either easing or tightening. What does that mean, right? So easing is when they're printing a lot of money. Think of during the last few years where they're coming out these massive spending bills, sending checks to everybody's houses, that type of stuff. That causes a lot of inflation. What they're trying to do now is tightening the other way so that when they take money in interest, taxes and stuff, they're lighting it on fire. So think of it, they have a huge pile of money, they're just lighting it on fire and they're destroying money. That is trying to slow down inflation at the same time they're doing that and reduce the government or the bank's risk when they're doing that. So that's important to know, those two sentences. All right, continue on. Bank of Canada, what else are they saying? Globally, consumer price inflation is coming down, largely reflecting lower energy prices compared to a year ago. Okay, but we're going to come back to that oil, okay? I'm coming back to that in a second. This drives me crazy because globally, they said it's coming down because of lower energy prices. I always tell you, this has nothing to do with Canada, has nothing to do with the States. This is to the mega oil producers, and it's not for up to me and you to decide that. So this isn't because of some magical wand that the United States or Canada has done. Underlying inflation remains stubbornly high. That's also really bugs me because a lot of people aren't out here looking for amazing treats for themselves. They just got to feed their family, and the price is higher, so they got to spend more to feed their family. But they're making huge cuts, which we're going to come to in a few moments. In the United States, the economy is slowing, although consumer spending remains surprisingly resilient and the labor market is still tight. Okay, so we keep hearing these same arguments all the time, right? Consumers are still spending money and there's still a lot of people working. Okay, let's continue on. Canada's economy was stronger than expected in the first quarter of 2023, and they said CPI ticked up to 4.4%. Okay, so let's break it down, you guys. For the governments, they're always talking, whether it's the United States, whether it's Canada, we follow both here. They always say that what they're going to be looking at is the number of jobs that are out there, CPI inflation, so the inflation, how much more does it cost you to live this year rather than last year, and core inflation when they strip out food and housing. So I get pissed off whenever they talk about core inflation because show me a human that doesn't need housing and doesn't use any fuel. To me, it just drives me crazy. So I don't know what kind of aliens we're looking at when we talk about that, but they want to know about that one. Okay. So if they strip away energy and housing, crazy, or if they look at the regular CPI, or they're looking at jobs. And so remember that the government doesn't want the maximum amount of people working. They need to have an amount of people working. There's nobody who's going to leave from one end of the country and move to the other side of the country just to work at McDonald's. They're not going to do that. So you need a certain amount of flexibility. Otherwise, people are going to say, you see, I'm the only person in the city that's available for a job, so you got to pay me more. That means they got to charge their clients more money to afford that salary, which means everything's got to go up. That's inflation. So that's one thing. So this is what they're talking about. But let's take a look at some of the charts from this, you guys. This is what drives me crazy about inflation, okay? So they always want to talk about core inflation, or they want to talk about real inflation, but this is from the 80s, okay? So let's just tell you, there's in the old days, for those who've been here before, I apologize, but in the old days, you used to take a buggy and put milk, eggs, bread, and a steak in it. And then a year later, they would put the milk, eggs, bread, and steak in it again. And they would say, what is the price last year versus this year? Identical products. Got it? And they would say, what is the price increase? But now they start messing with the numbers because people don't have the energy to go and look at how they calculate it. And they're always messing with the calculations. So they want to say, well, before it was a mortgage and now it's a rental. Before it was steak, now it's hamburger. They're going to try to mess up the way that they calculate. So if we just keep it super simple, the exact same way that the government would measure it before, milk, eggs, steak, and what did I say? 4 identical items in 2 different carts over 2 different years using their own numbers, not mine. Okay. They are claiming right now that inflation is sitting around 5%, but in reality, it's sitting somewhere around 13% right now, around 13%. So this is when they were measuring it the way they measured it in the 80s. In the 90s, they messed it up again. So even if we use their 90s numbers, we're coming in at 5 right now. We're actually hitting around 8.5 right now. But you see, that's when they started messing with it, and they started messing with it more and more to make it look better for them. But where are we sitting actually? We're probably sitting around 12%. So for those of you guys who are going out and buying groceries at the store and you're actually buying things out there, you're seeing those price increases. Listen, my mom, we're buried in smoke right now because of the Quebec wildfires in Canada. So people are buying these air purifiers. I had to go look at them for my mother, and the filter, to change the filter, was $50 last year. This year it's $65. Okay. That's a big increase. What is that? 25%. We went to look for the UV bulb that's inside of it. Last year, $20. This year, $40. Doubled in price. So when you guys hear that it's actually up 12%, I bet you guys believe me. You're seeing that pinch, because when you see it on the news that it's 5%, you're like, how on earth is that possible? All right, let's continue. You guys, I got more stuff to show you. Statistic Canada is showing that the percentage of population is exploding higher. We are bringing in more people than ever. Canada brought in over 1 million people last year, which is shocking, right? That we brought in that many people. So do we account for that? The actual answer is no, we don't. Let's take a look at something that drives me bananas. I'm showing you all the stuff that bugs me, but let's take a look at it. If we take a look at this right now, just let's say we're going to use some really interesting, say we're 39 million people last year, and now we're 40 million. We brought in 1 million people. That's shocking. Let's say last year, 39 million people all spent $1 each. That's $39 million in the year. Okay, I know. Just go with me. This year, we're 40 million people. We all spend $1 each per year. Now we spend $40 million. It makes sense, right? But guys, the government is saying, look at this number that we spent, 39 million last year. Look at the number of dollars that are this year, $40 million. And they're saying the economy is growing. That's like 2%, just over 2%. You guys should be like excited about this, right? It's up, but you guys are smart. You're going, guys, look at this. $1, $1. I'm only getting the same amount of money. My quality of life isn't better. So when they're screaming from the hilltops that your quality of life is better, the economy has grown, you're like, hang on. It's still only the exact same per population. This is what I'm trying to tell you. They're not adjusting for population. That is what you have to know. They're not adjusting for it. Okay. So just let's say also, when we're going to look at inflation, this was supposed to say population here. So that's what they're not adjusting for, is population. Okay. So that's around 2%. Also, just let's say for a second, last year I had to get rent, food, gas, a car, and insurance, and that cost me $50,000 in 2022. This year, the cost of everything is going crazy on me, David. I could barely afford it. So now I have to pay $60,000 for the exact same stuff. Listen, David, I'm staying in the exact same rental unit. I'm buying the exact same amount of food. I'm not buying anything more. I only drive to work. I'm not driving anymore. I have the exact same car and the same insurance coverage. It's just costing me more. What is the difference between 50,000 and 60,000? You would say that is 20% up. So In their view, with the way that they're calculating it, they're saying to you the economy is up 20%. But you're saying you're measuring this wrong. You're measuring it in your dollars. You're not measuring it in the amount of food that I buy or the type of house that I'm at. I'm at the same house, the same car, the same food. This is why people in Lebanon and Argentina and Colombia, that they are better at understanding what inflation is. We're not very good at it in North America. We have to understand this. This is the crux of everything. So if we are actually going up, remember the chart that we showed you, if the population is going up 2%, that's the population. And in addition to that, inflation we saw was hitting somewhere around 12%. That equals 14%. So if the economy is up 14%, we're at the exact same number. Okay, just think about that for a second. If the population goes up 2%, of course the GDP should go up 2%. If you inflate the money supply by 14% or 12%, you should have 12% increase in the GDP. So you need to be at 14%. Anything possible under 14% is a loss. So when we're looking at the Bank of Canada numbers and seeing, well, it's 2% up, 3% up, 1% up, that means that Canadians have already made a 12% cut on their quality of life, and we're still being told it's not enough. And this is where the absolute pummeling of our country is going to continue, unfortunately. We got to look at a couple more things that I want to show you, because this really fires me up. I feel bad for a lot of people. So if we take a look in April 2nd, OPEC decided to cut 1 million barrels of oil per day. Guys, this is in April. I know it's an old article I'm showing you, but remember, the Bank of Canada told us that its inflation is coming down because of energy prices. Well, OPEC handles 40% of the world's oil. So they're now cutting 1 million barrels of oil in April. And then guess what? They just announced again that they're going to reduce another million barrels a day, 2 million barrels a day. And so you would say to me right away, when you see that level of cuts, that means prices are going to come which way? Down or up? Well, if you reduce the supply, prices should go up. Okay, well, let's check it out. What are the prices doing? Let's go back 1 year. So prices are in free fall. Let's go back 1 year. Prices were $122 a barrel. And man alive, they've already sunk down to as low as the 60s. That's almost half price oil. That, in addition, is because of all of the cuts. So we would have thought the prices would have gone to the moon if you did that, but it's not. The reason is oil is the economy. Just like a human, blood is what runs through our veins, and that's what keeps us alive. That is life. Oil is the blood of the economy, whether we like it or not. We're trying to get away from it, right? But this is what moves the boats that bring our food. The oil is what makes the nitrogen that makes your food, that we use as fertilizer. It's what we put in our cars. Anything that you make out of plastic, the iPad that I'm writing on, the computer that I'm on, the glasses that I'm wearing, the pen that I'm using, everything that is made out of plastic is made out of fossil fuels. Now, I hope in the future we can make this all through some kind of like seaweed or something. But the fact is that the economy is oil today, and watching that decrease, we're watching the economy slow down. That's what we're watching right now. We are heading into a massive recession, whether they like it or not. I have been telling you that we've been in a recession since last fall. It just takes time to get there. All right, so let's take a look at the 5-year bond. What is happening right now with our 5-year bond? Let's go back just a year to date. We can see back in the spring when Silicon Valley Bank actually went down, rates crumpled as banks were afraid. But ever since around the May 11 or so, something like that, when it was lower at 2.9, when we saw all of the numbers coming in, then we knew danger was here. What numbers? We saw core inflation to the moon. We see the CPI to the moon. We're seeing job reports coming in that are boiling hot jobs. And now we're looking at the States, boiling hot jobs, super hot inflation, high core. Now, the States are caught between a rock and a hard place. And, Canada doesn't really do the right job all the time, but normally Canada follows whatever the United States does a few weeks later, 92% of the time or something like that. So when Canada and the States were going neck and neck together, we regained our dollar. Like the Canadian dollar is always worth a bit less than the American dollar. But as soon as Canada said, whoa, 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 we're going to pause you guys, what do you think happened? What do you think happened? Well, let's take a look at that, you guys. It's important to know. So if we just look going back 1 year, we were following them. But then earlier in this year, we decided to do a pause. And when we did that pause, our dollar sinks way, way down. And you may say, David, it doesn't really matter if we drop 3 or 4 cents. It doesn't really matter that much. Whoa. I got to tell you, that is wrong. Here's the thing. We bring in $1 trillion worth of stuff from around the world, and it's all priced in US dollars. So when our dollar goes down, it costs us more for stuff. You guys know what the word that is. It's inflation. It costs us more if our dollar goes down. So now that we are getting more with the program, and we're like, okay, guys, maybe we do have to raise rates. And the likelihood was now our dollar has recovered a little bit and it's heading up. It's a good thing for inflation right now that we're following the United States. Very, very, very important to know that. So today, what happened today? We got today an interest rate hike. So what does that interest rate hike actually mean? Let's take a look at this calculator. $1 million in our first loan at 6.75% and 25-year mortgage. The payment is $6,900, okay? $1 million, 6.75, 25 years. 6,900. If you look at the second loan here, I've upped the mortgage rate by 0.25, which is what it went up today. Notice though, to get the same payment of 6,900, we had to drop the payment on the home down to $980,000. So to regain the exact same payment, the buyers of your home that you were trying to sell, you are now going to have to sell your home for $20,000 less, maybe a little bit more. There is a rule of thumb that we always have to follow. 1% interest rate hike equals the home price has to drop 10%. How fast does that 10% drop right away? For a seller, it could take many, many, many months for that to happen. For a buyer, it happens instantaneously. You'll go to bed that night and your mortgage broker will say you can have $1 million loan. The next morning when rates go up, you're going to get a phone call that day that tells you, by the way, you can't get $1 million anymore. You can only get 980,000. Happens instantaneously. It's the sellers that take time to adjust their mortgages. All right, let's continue on. We see that Canada raised the rates in lockstep with the United States 8 times in a row. And then they did this funny thing, pause in March, pause in April, and then they realized they made a mistake and had to raise it. Whereas the United States, up, 10 times in a row, my friends, 10 times they raised their rates. So currently they're sitting at 5.25. Canada is sitting, as you can see right here, at 4.75, and we're a bit behind the United States. So if we were going to look at Canada and the States dollar, this is the Canadian to US dollar, we will actually, if we raise our rates some more, the exchange rate would improve. So that's a big deal for us to know. So here is the deal. Inflation is going to continue. This is what I want to tell you. Inflation is going to continue for several years. We're going to be seeing inflation in this high range for probably the next 5 years. One thing that we've learned from the inflation data and shadow stats we saw is that they do continue to manipulate that data, right? So you and me, have to be a little bit more proactive to go and look at what were the price of eggs last year versus this year, bread last year versus this year. And we can actually do the calculations ourselves better than what you get reported on the news. So once you realize that that inflation is high, you have to now go and dig into this to try to not believe what you hear on mainstream news. You and I have to figure out where we are in the stream of time. So if you were able to massively increase how much money you make in your business by 10%, but you see that inflation is really 12%, you've gone backwards 2%. So we always have to be outpacing real inflation, not stated inflation. You need to be ahead, okay? That's the only way for you not to fall backwards. And please study the economies that are in high inflation now, like Lebanon, like Venezuela, like Argentina. Study those guys. If you know somebody from those countries, please go talk to them because they will teach you a lot on how to deal with high inflation. How are they dealing with it? The thing is that they every single day are getting up and they are checking what the inflation is, buying things based on the new inflation, selling things based on the new inflation. If a store doesn't adjust their prices every single day, they will go out of business. Canada and the United States are lazy. We do not do that exercise. This has been forced upon them. They don't want it, but they are better with money than we are. That's what we have to understand, and we can learn from them. So we have to figure out a way to outpace it. What we're going to be hitting into is because Canada is way out of whack disposable income to home price, and the United States is a lot more reasonable if we're looking at national levels, except for the mega cities. If you're looking at Chicago and New York and Miami and LA only in the United States, Canada, Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal, if you're looking at the big cities, they're all going to be in trouble. They're all going to be feeling this massive, massive squeeze. This is what the Equifax has been telling us. And I did a video on Equifax that you can go check out later. It's at one of our lives. We have to look at that. The reason that I do this on YouTube all the time is I want people to save themselves and not get hurt. So we operate out of Toronto, but we follow all the news around Canada and the United States because we invest in Canada and the United States all over, out of province, out of country. It's very, very important to do that. So I can tell you that the majority of people don't do that. And so if you only invest, the number one thing I hear is I want to only invest within my neighborhood. I want to be able to drive there. Understandable. You have to be able to invest within your circle of competence. But I can tell you that everybody was afraid to ride a bike once. But once they could do it, they were very proud of it. So I just want you to expand your circle. If you only invest in one city, try to invest maybe an hour away. If you invest an hour away, maybe look at another province or state. If you look at another province or state, try another country. And you're going to keep on expanding your skill set. Make sure that you are keeping up with inflation. Inflation, number one, for those who are not prepared for it, is an absolute killer. It will take people out of the middle class and drive them into poverty. If, though, you are prepared for it and use it in the right way, you can use inflation to make a lot of money. This is what happened after the Second World War. Canada and the United States had huge amounts of debt, obviously, from fighting the war. And they used massive inflation to benefit the governments. And this is exactly what they are doing today. Please study the time from 1945 to 1952. Very important. This is where we're at today. If you compound this with Russia and China coming out of the system, in addition to our high debt load and all of the friendshoring and reshoring, we've done a lot of videos on this in the past, we are going to have systemic inflation for a while. So what does this come down to? It gives you hope. Me and you can use the same tool to either burn us or help us. Fire can be an amazing thing. When we sit down and we light a fire and we're freezing to death and we have to warm up our hands, it's a beautiful thing. But if it's burning down your house, it's a terrible thing. Water could, like at a hot day, and take a big glass of cold water, best thing ever. But if you have water leaking from your bathtub upstairs and it's leaking through the house, rotting everything, I have actually a video that I said, water is the enemy. Because when you leak water through a roof or leak it inside a property or the foundation problems, water destroys everything. So water can destroy or help. Fire can destroy or help. Maybe even kids can drive you crazy or give you a lot of goodness in your life. I think more good. But my point is you guys, everything that we have that's coming right now could be one of the best things that ever happened to you or the worst things that ever happened to you. I want to believe that this is great news of things that are coming to me. If you are a saver, they are incentivizing you to save right now. T-bills right now and bonds are giving you exorbitant, huge rates. So take advantage. Please educate yourself right now so that you are not hurt. If this helps you guys at all, I would love for you to follow the channel. Please support us and send this to a friend. It would really mean a lot to me. Thank you very much. And if you guys have any ideas of what you're doing to beat inflation, please leave comments below. I read them all. I try to get back to what I can. I hope that you're going to be okay. I want you all to be okay. Please follow me. I always say next 2 years is going to dictate the next 2 decades of your life. And hopefully we all have many decades ahead. Thank you very much for coming by. We love you guys. Thank you.